Welcome to Conserving Knowledge, a brand new series at Into the Wild. Today I'm going to be talking to Gerrie Camacho, a carnivore specialist and a conservationist with years of experience. He's even survived multiple predator attacks. We're going to be discussing conservation and why it matters more than ever.
Well, I think, it was obviously a calling. Since I was a young boy, I knew I wanted to do something in the bush, and when TV started off in 1977, I think around about 76, 75, I can't even remember exactly the time, but anyway, that's when we started seeing the odd wildlife program, and before that I knew I wanted to become a game ranger, if you want to call it that. And then these programs actually just enticed it and tells me that's what you wanted to become. And at that time and period, we all focused on the Kruger Park, and that was conservation. So if you got a job in Kruger Park, then you become a game ranger and a conservationist. I didn't realize there's so many aspects of conservation or fields or disciplines in conservation that you can actually go into. At that time, I just wanted to be in the bush and work with wildlife. But I always had an affinity for carnivore. So I've never, I think as a very young boy, my mother said to me, and I was always fascinated by lions, and at that point in time you had the Kustos magazine, that was the only magazine about it, that wildlife in it, from the Kruger Park. And that was my reference as to what wildlife is about. And well, that's technically where I started off, and I've never changed my view or my opinion, or never. I think when you're a very young boy, you want to become a fireman and a policeman, and you had all these aspirations as a young kid. But I think at the age of about 10, 11, I decided this is the route I want to go, and I never changed my mind.
You're a very rare breed, because I know from my point of, from my life, I didn't really know what I wanted to do until I was mid-20s, late 20s. So I'm envious. I'm envious.
Well,
I now realize that I would love to be more involved in your world from a filmmaking point of view.
I think there's so much scope in the wildlife fraternity. For it's such a. I've heard a quote from a guy many years back. He was traveling through South Africa, and we can't even remember what the symposium was I attended, and he was a keynote speaker from the States. And the one thing that he actually said there was very, and I think that's absolute truth. He was saying that any country whose riches is under the soil is a poor country. So Africa sits with such vast richness above the soil, you can be absolutely a thriving country. And I think the wildlife industry and the tourism and things like that actually points that out. It's such a strong industry if it can be upheld properly and maintained.
I totally agree. I think nowadays when we look at what's happening in the world with AI, everyone's quite afraid of what's going to happen. I see a beautiful future if conservation, if people like you can help the next generation see what we see today. I think that's going to become the most beautiful stories to be told, the most authentic thing to see or experience, because I think the world now is getting so saturated with fake content. It feels like society is losing a grip on nature, and I feel very lucky, and I believe that South Africa and Africa is the last frontier almost of nature, adventure, maybe South America, but I was there last year, and when I was in the Pantanal, I must be honest with you, I really enjoyed it. I loved the people, but it made me realize what a gem of a continent we sit on, how much life is here, and what we're going to delve in tonight is hopefully helping everyone out there understand a little bit more about conservation in Africa, South Africa especially, and how we can maybe change the narrative a little bit. My next question to you would be, when you started out 40 years ago, what was conservation back then, and what is conservation now?
I think if you think of when I finished my studies, everybody was applying at state authorities and places like that, statutory authorities for job position, because we were under the impression that was the only place where you can deal with conservation. Being in a state organ, whether it's Natal Parks or in those days, or the Transvaal Nature Conservation or the national parks. There were a lot of bodies, and there were very few NGOs actually that was providing work, as well as private sector. It was very few and far between. And I think in those days you assumed that the parks that were established was the nature parks for South Africa, and you need to get a job there and work there as a manager or whatever, a ranger, or whatever field that you can go into. And I think what actually happened is that a few things happened by default. It didn't happen because it was planned. And as we've said before, it's actually, when I started working in the private sector, I think from my whole classroom of over 60 people that applied for jobs, I was the only one that went to the private sector. All the other people worked in state organs and things like that. And I realized that the challenges are, I didn't have experience in the state except for what I've been as a student seeing in the parks going on. And it was all the stuff that you wanted to do, game capture and moving and to research and all kinds of things that was going on. And it made an impression on me as a student. But I knew there was something, I kind of had a feel that there was something more. And also I felt that we need to discover, I won't say new horizons, but the challenges are going to get bigger in terms of what. And then what actually happened is I was given a job I was very lucky to have some of the best people that I could work for in the private sector. Other people later on had bad deals with not such good support structures or supportive people that they were working for. And I got a lot of freeway and leeway in terms of what I could do. Although they were target driven, they gave me the opportunity to do whatever. So I think that allowed me to alleviate that pressure of you had to be like a rigid machine in terms of doing certain things. When I started working in a state, it was very difficult for a number of reasons, because I used to do my own maintenance and stuff, and suddenly you got a part that's roads department that's doing the maintenance. You're not doing the maintenance anymore. So it was more of a hands-off approach in the state sectors and more of a management approach, but also the admin load became 15 times heavier than I had in the private sector. But in terms of the change of conservation, the face of conservation, in those days there were loads. If you look at this area where we're sitting in, it was mainly cattle ranches and a few sugarcane farms and citrus. And I can't even remember if it started off with bananas, but anyway, those were technically the things that was around here, but it was the odd patches of cultivated fields, and it was more bush. And the bush were mainly cattle ranching, or a few small game camps started popping up. But the cattle ranchers in the area had loads of lions bothering them, coming in all the time, and other carnivores, hyenas and things coming in bothering them. But the thing that actually happened in that time and that period is that people started saying, listen, I can't compete with the game animals, so get rid of those that compete for the cattle grazing. So it was the wildebeest, buffalo, all those kind of things that competed for grazing were removed from the cattle ranches. So it was mainly impala and kudu and those things that were still allowed in the cattle ranches. And people started, the local guys started hunting for having biltong, just to go out. And they started enjoying this experience going out in the bush and doing the biltong hunting, and that thing started building up. And cattle ranchers started realizing there's an opportunity to make extra money out of the cattle, the impalas and the kudus that they had. And they started selling these as extra income. And some people even converted further and said, okay, we're going to get rid of the cattle because it's such a hazard in this low-veld area. There's so much diseases and things that they had to deal with. They'd rather go over completely to game. And I think the property that I started working on was one of those properties that was converted. There was still a lot of old signs of cattle posts in the property. I removed a lot of extra fencing that was on the reserve that was not supposed to be there. As you can see, it's old reserve fence, old cattle fences. And then they opened up, and we were interpreting this is the ideal for conservation, because now you're opening more land up for conservation. And in fact, actually, to cut it short in terms of explanation, over time you realize that most of these areas were actually overstocked. Some of the cattle ranches were actually better managed biodiversity-wise than the cattle at the game farms. But the game farmers were tolerating leopards and things like that, so the leopards started becoming more and more because they were tolerated, whereas the cattle ranchers didn't tolerate them. Okay. So it actually created an environment for certain carnivores to start thriving, getting better, because there was much more food in an area for them. But what also happened is that you slowly got a gradual decline in certain areas in terms of biodiversity, and I've seen that on camera trapping exercises that I had on cattle ranches and next door on game ranches on the same habitat type. You can see the biodiversity just cramping up because of overgrazing. And there's a long explanation why it's happening, but it did happen, or it does happen. So I think there was a lot of good intent in certain things, but that also had its bad spin-offs in a certain extent. But it's also that it was difficult for game farmers to control the animals. So the amount of money that you made back from game ranching, you had to do way more intensive things in terms of getting the same amount of money back that you got from cattle ranching. So I think that to a large extent, and then it actually converted, most of these areas converted to the land that was arable for agriculture, converted to agricultural fields. So you started sitting with these little corridors for carnivores to move in. And that's the point where we're actually getting now to, is to look at where the kind of your reservoirs, or your, if you can call it for other word, breeding grounds, whatever, for certain species like leopards, your source areas, if you want to call it that, is more strongly where there's a population that still replenishes itself, and then have excess which spills over, and you get them into the sink area. So you sit with a system where you sit with certain, it's forming an island, or certain islands where there's stronger populations of, for example, leopard, and then there's another stronger population there, but in the middle the population is dwindling, you know, they're getting smaller and smaller. And what we're looking at is having connected corridors that connects these for leopard, for example, that they can move themselves from one source area to the next source area. So that will be an important conservation model. So we have to start remodeling the way the landscape has changed in terms of human population. We had to remodel the way we're looking at the conservation model. So yes, there's a lot of changes. The science have, if you compare a doctorate, but you also have to compare the resources available. The guys that initially started off leopard research in South Africa, the Peter Norton in the Cape Province that started working there, and Anton Grimbeck in the Waterberg, those were about the studies, and the one of Bailey in the Kruger Park were about the three main studies that was conducted with very limited resources. So the results were very difficult to really apply in terms of what you can do in a bigger find in a bigger population. With the latest technology that came in, and this was recent, I mean, we were still I started off a leopard project in Leidenburg area. It was interesting, and the guy that's actually the master brain behind the old Africam and Wild Earth TV, Graham Wellington, he came to me and said to me, "Why do you need to get this job done properly?" Because at that time I was still struggling to really get good core data and hardcore data. And we had a few collars on leopards that we were tracking, hand tracking. And I said to him, well, there's a thing that they call camera traps, but it's very limited because you had these film cameras still that had 36 photos and then it's gone. And Quentin Martins, when he started off the Cape Leopard Trust, he used those camera traps. We started at the same time with two. We didn't know about each other, but we had a similar idea in two different areas. And we actually linked up, and then we started learning from each other, and we actually had we got a good thing going at the end of the day. But Graham actually said, okay, he's got a cousin in the UK that can build electronic or LED camera traps for us. And this guy came out and he built stuff that was amazing. I still have those camera traps. One is still inside.
So is that pioneering camera traps in a way?
The digital, yes, for using digital camera traps. I mean, I'll show you the one that I've got here that you can see what was built. And then we started getting these pictures, loads of pictures, at least where they used to have 36 pictures of grass moving and a mouse here and the odd leopard. we started getting more leopard pictures and all kinds of other pictures. So it was actually, it's recent. What I'm trying to say is that things evolved recently.
Okay.
But it had if you look at the exponential growth in that industry, in the camera trapping industry, and the way people are interpreting data, like it just went exponentially, like in a steep up curve.
How long of a time period are we talking about here?
20 years. So a lot of things have changed in the way we can interpret. Those days the guys didn't have that. The leopards were quite skittish and wild and far apart, and so they had to find the odd leopard. It was usually cattle raiders or something that they'd collar and follow around, or livestock raiders. And so the information was limited, but I would see those guys as the guys that actually enticed the next group, and I would be in that next group that started looking at their work and say, listen, but we had research questions that we had to answer in that time, and that was based on the fact that there was a lot of questions asked as to how permits are issued. How do you know when you're issuing a permit that it's issued in an area where there's a viable population to actually harvest leopard from? And we didn't have the answers. So we were looking for those answers, and we started doing the physical track counts, walking around, finding tracks, making casts. I sit with a heap load of casted tracks that you can identify like a human hand. You can see which animal walked where. So we started off doing those track counts, and then we did the odd collaring of leopards, where we had the collars, and then we started getting the camera trapping, and then we started getting the GPS collars where you can actually track them on the computer. Before that, you had to go out for every point, and if you can't find that point, you can't map it. And then you had to, and it was actually a very tough way to collect data in those days. So all these things had to be pioneered and actually went a certain route, and now it's actually just boomed. But the problem that we're sitting now is that the answers that we're getting is very difficult to compare to that time, because you don't really have a benchmark or a snapshot of what was the real extent of animals, but we can use history. It was an interesting thing that in that project I struggled to capture leopards in a cage trap, to put a collar on. Struggled a lot, and one of the guys said to me, you'll never catch a leopard in that area, they're too skittish. And if you started talking to the landowners, they would say to you, listen, yeah, if you see a leopard, we shoot it, we kill it. So they don't want it because they were raiding the cattle, or they saw it as a threat. So the ones that were shot first were the relaxed animals. They would be the ones looking just a second too long, and then that would be the taken. The skittish brother that was hiding in the grass would say, now I know why I'm hiding. So the population that was left was the more skittish ones, which would superimpose the genetic composition to have that, or the trait, or the, what do you call it, the
behavior.
Yeah, to be able to show more skittish behavior. And when I started working with the landowners and enticing them not to kill animals and talk with us and work with us, we started getting a change where you started getting more leopards on the camera traps. There were also cattle ranches that were converted to game ranches, and this is actually a very unique, where you could see this, where it was cattle ranch, what the leopard population was on that cattle ranch for 4 years, and then it was converted to livestock game, and then suddenly the population of leopards exploded on that property. You know, the 2 or 3 that you had suddenly turned into 7, 8 leopards in that same area, and it was quite interesting. And the jackal population crashed, and the caracal population went down when the leopard population went up. So these are the things that you could tell from the camera traps.
And is that a good thing? The caracals and the jackals going down?
If you compare the Sabi sand and the population of leopard in the Sabi sand, that's another reason for that, and that's all the waterholes of all the impala that it attracts. So there's the buffer species that's readily available, creates a higher tolerance for leopards, between leopards. So your leopard population is according to the current knowledge that we have, much denser. It's the highest dense population of leopards in the country anyway. Based on the fact that there's enough food, so they tolerate. You don't need to. Animal with a full stomach's not looking for conflict. It's animal with an empty stomach that's looking for conflict. And if you have to fight for food, then he's even more aggressive, and they start picking up scars, so they're more territorial. So the fact that we're sitting with a scenario where you are having different scenes that's been created by man, and it actually created more habitat. But then on the other hand, you sit with other areas where leopard used to occur, where they've been extirpated because of human intervention activity, and not only for agricultural reasons or whatever, or land development in the sense of human, it's physical takeoff of the individual animals, the leopards, for example, for the skin trade, for the muti trade, for those type of things. So there's if your question about have the landscape changed for conservation, yes, drastically. And our measures and our interventions needs to be more drastic, but more, I'd say, softer in the approach of we can't enforce legislation anymore. We have to work together with the people on the ground that are dealing with these issues to make them part of the solution and not enforce legislation on them, because we're going to lose the plot again.
Before we get to the next question, should we attend to a bit of fire? Yeah?
Before we smoke ourselves out.
Thank you for that. We'll get a bit more fire going and a little drink.
Cheers.
Cheers.
On good times.
How do you see the next 10 years of conservation going? Or shouldn't we even say 10 years? Should we say 20? Should we say 30?
I think to give you the best answer there is if we can't control the human population expansion and influx in certain areas, we are going to face certain challenges, and you won't have an army that can stop that influx, because you'll have to have a permanent law enforcement system to enforce that, and then you're going to sit with two sides of enemies that have to deal with it. So conservation is also going to be always going to be the thing that's going to come second best in this process. I don't think that we can afford to go down the route where we have to forcefully keep people out of areas. We have to find ways to create an economy outside these parks, and actually including land. If you can expand land where there's still patches available, and even put up small lodges where people can have different types of experiences, but also create revenue, and you actually you are kind of winning back land for conservation where it's still possible, and in make the boundaries of the areas that's under threat bigger. So at this stage, the core area of conservation in these systems are too small to really maintain a long-term extensive conservation, in my opinion. I think we will need to have a model where we are looking at various models. It will be a multifaceted, multidiscipline type of approach, where you have different types of scenarios where you sit with meta-population management in small parks all over, where you're exchanging certain genetics of small animals that occur at low densities, like your cheetahs, leopards, wild dogs, lions and things like that. And then you sit with a model where you have to look at expanding, and we are doing that, looking at expansion of parks, currently expanding the area for various reasons, obviously to have more land under conservation, but also to make sure that your core threat, the area of threat, the core is big enough to be able to sustain the pressure that's coming its way. And whether that's going to be perfect in the next 10 years, I can't say, but we have to work towards that kind of model to see if it's working, and we can't give up. We don't have any guarantees, because we don't know what the political climates will look like in 5 years and 10 years time. But we do need strong political buy-in and people that are willing to work together towards the same purpose and cause, and understand what we are aiming at and how we're going to get there.
Does our constitution look after animals at all, or conservation?
I think we sit with one of the best legislations and the constitution in the world in terms of what is permitted and supposed to happen. I think the ability with the pressures and the people that are employed to apply these constitutional regulations and stuff to make sure it's there, and the people that are kind of posing a threat to it, the mass on the other side is just too big at this stage for the people that's supposed to police and apply certain things to make sure that it stays relevant, and we're not losing the fight against the I won't call it there's criminal elements, there's various elements that's impacting on it. And I think that's the thing is, I think the Constitution, everything is there, it's good. I think it's the application and the assurance that these things are kept intact and then it's adhered to by all people. That's a difficult part.
What is the most difficult things in conservation that you deal with?
I think the most difficult thing is to get the various so-called stakeholders to see the same. To give you an example, the word sustainable utilization. There's a lady that's doing a hypothesis now on that testing on what it means for various groupings, and she used the groupings from the wildlife people, that's wildlife ranching, the private sector, the ranching guys that's involved in ranching, and say, listen, just allow us to do whatever we want to do with our lions, we will look after them. Up to the group that says no, the state should take full control and nothing should be hunted or shot or killed or whatever for whatever, or utilized, put it that way, for any purposes. And then you sit to a state that they have to regulate these things, and you sit with NGOs that have to make a living in the middle of this, and you sit with on the other edge maybe the people that were culturally utilizing the resources of these animals, whether it's body parts or whatever thing, but to see whether it's sustainable, the skins and the harvesting and your.
You're talking about muti.
Yeah, the muti industry, but also what we refer to as your the traditional healers and the traditional uses of the animals. It's not necessarily trophy hunting or stuff like that. It's for the skins and the body parts.
That's also a cultural thing.
It's a cultural thing for certain cultures, not for everybody. But it does apply pressure, and if you can look at it mainly in the areas where leopards historically did occur, people utilize it. So areas where it didn't historically occur was less reliant on leopard body parts as a muti trait. But you also sit with the fact that the tiger bone trait, for example, in India and in China and those places, crashed because of the availability of tigers, depletion of the tigers, the resources to find tiger bones. And then the tiger wine industry reverted to lion bones to supplement it. And then it started pointing towards leopard bones as well. So it was carnivore bones for the tiger wine type of replacement. So you do sit with a situation, you would have thought that, okay, so tigers are now extirpated now, there won't be any pressure. But now saying, okay, we still need to make the tiger wine, but we're not going to make it from tigers anymore, we're going to make it from lions. So the pressure will always be on the resources, and there will always be exploiting pressures. And you have to balance it out, and that's what the Constitution is about. It's about sustainable use. And sustainable use, according to this lady's hypothesis or study, not hypothesis, but she was looking at how people perceive in various cultural groups or domains of society, how they perceive sustainable use. And sustainable use technically just means that you can't harvest above the recruitment of the population. So if there's 10 hectares available for an elephant, you can keep one elephant on 10 hectares, but you must assure that in 100 years there's still one elephant on it and 10 hectares. You know, you can only harvest if you harvest, or if that's a stupid actually example, but if you had 5, if you harvest 1, then the 4 will reproduce another 1 in time again to harvest. And if it takes 5 years for that next one to be reproduced, it means sustainable utilization means you can only harvest 1 every 5 years to be sustainable. If you harvest above that, you're going to deplete the population. And that's as simple as it is. It's not something that's rocket science. And it makes a lot of sense, but the people either misinterpret or other people might make it more murky to be able to utilize that opportunity to create a kind of a societal hype in terms of people, confusing people to get more attention for certain things. And it's actually not rocket science.
It sounds like what we are all striving for is not a dictatorship, but having less cooks in the kitchen. It sounds like conservation has a lot of feet that it's having to step over. So everyone's on a bit of eggshells, and everyone's tiptoeing about this conversation.
Yeah.
Yet, like you say, there is logic at the end of the tunnel.
I think if people just stick to their guns and what they can do and not interfere with other people's, I think that the worst part is where there's a constant discreditation of people that have good intent and are trying their best to conserve and preserve nature, and then trying to find ways of actually defamation of these people that are busy with these works. Always see them as bad. They're not doing the jobs. They're bureaucrats. They enjoy killing animals because that's why they're in the job. They like carrying rifles because they want to shoot animals. You know so you carry a firearm because you want to protect yourself in extreme circumstances. You don't carry a firearm because you enjoy killing an animal. And that's how do you change that perception? You know, people are looking at you carrying a firearm and suddenly saying, okay, so you are a killer of animals, you want to hurt an animal. It went to the extreme where they are now sitting and giving animals human rights, which is, or busy trying to do that, which in my opinion is going to be the downfall of conservation. It won't serve the purpose that the people are. I don't know what the intention is of that grouping that wants to push that sentient being, and I understand that people are sentimental about animals. We are all
get emotional.
Yeah, and it's a normal thing that happens, but there's a cut-off point for every kind of thing where logic should prevail. And sanity should prevail, and rather more than your emotions and what you want to share. Because you, at the end of the day, you are serving 10 people's emotion to try and soothe that. In the meantime, you are killing 1,000 people's ability to live. And those 1,000 people are going to get hungry, and hungry people are going to get angry, and angry people are going to get aggressive, and they're not going to listen to laws. So you have to make sure that what you want to achieve in the process is going to create that turnaround that you want.
Well, hopefully we can have more discussions with more of your peers so that more of us can learn and be more educated about what conservation really is. Because I think when I sit in Cape Town and I look into Kruger National Park, I've got an idea of what should happen. I've got an opinion, I think I know, but when I sit and I listen, I don't know anything really. I hope that this kind of platform helps make people more aware.
I think it's a great opportunity, and I think there are guys out there that can provide much better quality information that I can provide in certain issues. I give you the broader picture, but there's people that can color that picture for you much more definitely with information and data and all kinds, which is difficult to have in a conversation like this. But I think you can get brilliant guys out there. There are fantastic people in government, in the private sector, everywhere, which are doing fantastic work, and especially people with great experience. I'm talking to people that has good experience in the field as well, not just people that's brilliant in science and just entered the world of conservation and now has all the answers on models. I'm talking about a person that can stand there and have a gut feel about something, and just testing his gut feel, and 90% of the time is correct. You know, instead of having a model that you have to roll out every time to try and figure out these questions. I think there are fantastic people out there. If I can refer you to a number of people that you can interview and get fantastic interviews from, and also a variety of perceptions and things that the people are dealing with.
I really think there's an opportunity to have an open discussion about wildlife and conservation. I think people are hungry to understand more, and hopefully discussions like this will help fuel more discussions with other people. Tell us about your love for leopards.
Well, I think it also happened. Well, I've always had a big, I'd say, affinity for carnivores or wildlife, the bush in all its senses, whether it's birds, just listening to sounds, the trees, whatever. I love the bush. So sitting around the campfire like this is to me an ultimate experience. I think that the wildlife thing, but in all these instances, you get generalists, people that does all the different types of things in conservation, and then you get your specialists, people that specializes. And I think the carnivore world has always intrigued me simply because two reasons. The one, it's intriguing species. It's a species that has a stronger bond with the young and longer term bond with the young. And they are lower density species. They occur at the top of the food soil pyramid. So they sit, if anything happens at the bottom, it affects them at the top. So for me, the logic was simple, that if you can preserve the ones at the top, it means that you've done the things correctly at the bottom. So it will be protected. So my aim for conservation is to protect the land and the habitat. You won't have leopards around if there's not adequate habitat on land. So it was, instead of working with the grasses and trying to have models for how the best feeding regime should be, I'm just jumping in at the top and just making sure things are going well at the top.
That's a fantastic way to look at it, you know, because initially when I heard you're a carnivore specialist, I was like, okay, well, it's obviously all about carnivores, but it absolutely makes sense that it's all about the habitat and then it filters upwards. What does your job entail on a day-to-day basis? I'm sure there's a lot of admin, but give us your highs and your lows.
I think there's an old saying that the job's not done until the paperwork's the job's not finished until the paperwork's done. Yes, sitting in a and I thought we were the only ones sitting in the governmental or the state industry that are dealing with heaps of bureaucratic red tape and information. A lot of things make sense. There's a reason for that. There's a reason where you need a proper paper trail in certain extensions, and especially nowadays with all the challenges that you face in terms of how easy it is for people to complain and say that the state's not doing their work or the government's not doing their work. I think that part is, unfortunately, I think the hardcore part for most people in my line of work, that we have to deal. And lately we're dealing with a lot of policy revision and looking at different things in the Constitution, how we should revise it. So there's legislation that needs to be revised. There's norms and standards, policies, all the regulations, all these things that are changing and adapted and also added onto it. So we're trying to make it. We're trying to in terms of not making it overcomplicated. At this stage, what I enjoy a lot lately, and I think we came to a point which was very frustrating because it felt we were going nowhere. And suddenly it feels like we're getting a core of experts at the top, people with good experience from various fraternities, where we used to be only the provinces and national. It's now national parks people, and there's people from all types that have different ways of thinking and looking at things, different experiences, adding their voices to the pool, and also the private sector people, and there's lots of people adding their voices to this. We're sitting with people that are pulling more and more resources in the right direction to try and get a system that's more logic and less cumbersome for the the manager on the ground that have to implement these regulations and rules that we are applying. So, and there's really an eagerness to make it simple and make it easier. We've moved away from the strong people that says we the state and we'll tell you what to do. You know, the policing type of approach, where it's more of an inclusive type of approach that we're sitting with lately. I think that makes it more, it creates an environment where you're more enticed to participate, knowing that you're dealing with loads of admin, and that admin keeps you busy till 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the mornings. But you know it's important to get it done because, and the point I want to get to, once that is in place, it will create a better platform for the next generation to be able to do more conservation work again. Somebody have to do the dirty work and the bad work. So that is the cumbersome part, and it is the thing that you don't want to do. But you don't want people that doesn't have the experience to plow into those documents, because they're going to create another monster again. You need the guys with the background and experience and the background knowledge that can put their knowledge together to say, let's make it work in another way. And I think that's where I realized that you have to spend more time behind the books to get the paperwork done in order to have a better system going. So that is unfortunately the boring part and the challenging part, but I buy into the importance of it for the next generation and for conservation.
What's your favorite parts of the job?
I think transferring knowledge to see how people are developing, from being kind of an insecure person in a job that just qualified or whatever, or started off not even qualified, and then enabling that, or not enabling him, but giving him enabling guidelines or support system to see a person evolving from lack of knowledge to having that kind of the next level of security, or not security, but confidence levels that he will be able to do certain things. I think that to me is always, training has always been one of my things that I felt that if you can't transfer knowledge, you're sitting with dead knowledge. You have to, and then also I think I've experienced most things. So if I have to start writing a book about experiences that I've had, I've experienced most, if I call it in South Africa, the South African context, not seeing grizzlies and things in the environment or working with them. And I think to catch another leopard, to catch another lion, to work with those animals is a job for me, but I still cherish it as a not just an honor, but also a privilege. But for me to share it with somebody else, it's a lifetime experience. Most cases you get people from overseas, they've been saving money for so many years, and the person comes back to you and say, "You know what, I can give you lots of examples of what happened to Vodacom, the CEO of Vodacom years back. He said he took his keynote that he's written, and he said, I'm going to chuck this, I'm going to tell you what happened last night. It was a life-changing experience for me. And it was a simple thing that we just draw him on a vehicle, said, are you interested? We're going to collar a lion, do you want to come along? They were busy with doing a complete other do. And I got a call that lion, and they said, we wanted to collar, is down there, and it's an opportunity at the gate. And I said to him, listen, you're going to excuse us, we've been looking for this lioness for a long time, we're going to try and put a collar on her. And I thought, for the next minute, I thought, is there somebody that wants to join? And everybody left the room. The food went cold and everything. They just left the room. And we were 3 game vehicles full of people that went down, darted the lioness, put the collar on, and showed them what the lioness looked like and explained to them what it was about. And the next day he had to do the keynote speech. It was for the Lion Festival in, I think it was 98 or 99. In a Leopard, and he was the keynote speaker, and they opened up the checkbook because of that experience. So for him, that was a life-changing experience, having that. To me, that was a typical example of, and I've seen that many times with other people saying, listen, wow, it will never be the same for me. I can give you heaps of examples of places where one was quite a funny incident. We were doing training for overseas students. And this one lady that was with the one night, we were following the lions, we were doing lion research and looking at lions adapting in a new system that we introduced them into. And they were sitting on the back of this, I mean, this is our job, we're doing this day in and day out. And they asked if they can join, and 3 of them joined us that night on the vehicle. And we were said to them, listen, this can go until the next morning. You might never get sleep, we might be better. Said, no, it's fine. I mean, they're from England and America, and I can't remember where the other person was from. But this girl that was with us on the vehicle, we stopped and we took out the gas bottle and made some coffee. It was cold, it was very cold, and we sitting there, the lions were busy feeding on the wildebeest. They just killed the wildebeest, so it was right next to the vehicle. In the thicket, we drove into the thicket of this Land Cruiser, got to the site, and I got a gas bottle out, started making coffee. I said, who wants coffee? And she said, no, I don't drink coffee, sorry. And I made coffee for myself and my friend and the film camera guy, and then the other guy that was there said, okay, it's fine, we'll have coffee. And she smelled the coffee, and she said, can I have a sip of that? She just wanted to taste a sip of it. I said, yes, and I gave her a sip of my coffee, and I said, oh, this is not bad, can I have some? And I think there was enough left, I can't remember, I made her some extra. And she drank the coffee. And then she phoned her sister. I mean, those days cell phones just started coming out. She phoned her sister in France. And in the middle of the night, she's saying to her, you know, you won't believe what I'm busy doing. I'm sitting here in the bush, looking at lions right next to the vehicle, 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. They're busy, they just killed the wildebeest. I'm watching this, and because I said to him, you know that we're most probably the only people in the world that's doing this at this stage. And when they realized that, she tried to convey that message. She said, I'm busy drinking coffee, and the sister didn't say to her, wow, you're sitting, I said, you're doing what? Drinking, but you don't drink coffee.
You're drinking coffee now.
The sister sitting in France couldn't grasp the opportunity. She was just telling her that she was drinking coffee, but she was sitting with lions and stuff. She was trying to explain to her sister was more worried about the fact that she's drinking coffee and not about the fact that she's now in the middle of the bush in an open vehicle. There's nothing to protect her. We're sitting with hungry lions around us and stuff, which would have been the type of question you would have supposed, but isn't it dangerous, you know? But you're not drinking coffee.
It's almost like for people like, you know, when you don't understand this, it's so unreal that it's almost fantasy, you know. So the only thing that you probably related to was the coffee.
Yeah, and the lodge afterwards, when I spoke to one of the managers, said, you know what, you shouldn't have taught that girl to drink coffee because she's drinking up all our coffee now. And I got emails from her years later on, still now and again, an email from this woman, I can't even remember her name, but she said, and she'd always ended up by saying, I'm still drinking coffee, and I'm still drinking coffee. So that connection, and I'm trying to say is there was a certain connection there that was forever. And I think those are the things that for me are highlights, if I can say it. It might sound simple, but it's...
No, I totally agree with you.
It's not about catching a lion or catching an elephant or dehorning a rhino. To me, it's about see how you could bring people's minds around to understand the thing something differently.
Yeah, I've not spent as much time in the bush as you, but the little that I have, I had the opportunity to take my cousins from Canada and their friends to the Kruger, and I remember driving in, and we went through Hoedspruit, we went to the Umbabat area, and I will never forget, but my cousin's friend was sitting on the back of the game viewer, and we stopped for a giraffe, and I just hear crying, and I look back and she's sobbing, and she's like, it was all about a giraffe. She's never understood the size, and it was almost every single experience that they had, it was just awe-inspiring, and I can totally see how that is the highlight, you know.
I can tell you hundreds of these stories, but I think if I have to say what makes me want to continue and do what I do and more, it's not about myself. I enjoy the bush, I enjoy the peace, I enjoy the quietness, I can look at the feather and enjoy it, I can look at the leaf and enjoy it, I can smell the smoke of a fire and enjoy it. And it's all part of the bigger picture to me, but the things that makes me want to continue what I'm doing is to see the change in people happening. Worrying about the future of certain things, looking at certain changes. I think the scariest thing for me is to look at what's happening at areas that we perceived as ideal reserves, and animals will be happy and safe forever, and see how the human encroachment on those peripherals are causing the impact on the inside of those areas. And then also I've had so many personal experiences that was dangerous and that was life-threatening. But that's, to me, is not the thing that's part of the job. It's more to see where we're busy losing. We're not going to achieve certain goals in terms of doing proper conservation work and actually preserving the gold that we have above the ground in terms of our wildlife and natural wonders or beauty. Those things are to me scary in terms of knowing that we are fighting a losing battle against mining applications and things like that, and other development. And if we don't deal with that properly, we're going to sit with a country that's going to be pretty much chopped up into little pieces of highly fragmented habitat that might not, and that to me is the thing that actually I'm worried about. So my main drive is to try and see how I can assist to get around that it doesn't happen.
If I'm listening correctly, it's the admin, the actual paperwork that's going to drive the science to make the right decisions for the future of conservation.
Yeah, well, that's actually what I'm trying to say. Not that I enjoy doing it, but it's something that I know that needs to be done. But as a official that's still mandated in an authority, working for a provincial authority or for whatever authority, I have 5 years left to make my mark in that, to create a change that I perceive that should be happening. But to answer the question in another way is, how long will I still be active? As long as I live and as long as my mind's still sane. You can't retire from a passion. You can retire from a job, but you can't retire from a passion. It's something that will keep on burning in you.
People out there, the people that are watching, this could be someone in India or Tokyo or Australia. It can be anyone in the world. So if we think global, is there a message that you can give people? What can they do? For me personally, I feel I need to learn more, but is there a message that you want to give people out there that you might think is the way forward?
I think, yeah, to give context to what I'm going to say now is, last year we had the first global leopard conference in the world that was actually mainly driven by the Cape Leopard Trust. And it was people from all over the globe that presented the leopard information, from South Africa, Nepal, Java, all the way to Russia and places where people were working, Arabia, Saudi Arabia, all the places where people were working on leopards. And to suddenly listen for a few days on end to different, realizing we sit with the same challenges. To understand that South Africa is still ahead of some countries in terms of, if you look at the Amu leopard, which is the most threatened species of leopard at this stage, a subspecies of leopard, and there's only just over 100 now back in nature, but they're highly inbred. They look like bulldogs or short tails and stuff like that. It doesn't look like a leopard anymore. We still sit with a jewel in terms of that. So I think from a world perspective, looking at that, and then also a lot of our used to be national forums like your Wild Dog Advisory Group, and there was a South African thing, the Lion Management Forum was a South African thing, the Cheetah Management Forum was a South African thing. It's now becoming more global, so it's people that are participating in those forums that are dealing elsewhere in the world with the same situations, with the same species. So I think if we're not globalizing, we are coming to a point where we are learning from each other and realizing, so there's more a lean towards, instead of everybody sitting on their own ivory tower, or seeing what we can do as a conglomerate of different societies and whatever fraternities who's involved, to formulate something that's viable and sensible for the protection of certain species. So there's species plans to protect the threatened species, and then there's also the biodiversity plan to look at biodiversity. And within that, you sit with your species plans. I think that the good news is that the processes and the way of thinking is becoming more logic in terms of trying to protect and preserve. There are always flaws in every system, like you said, with people that are more academic, sitting in decision-making positions that don't understand what's going on the ground. Excuse me, that will always be a challenge. And then you sit with people that are in positions of power that's not really got the ability to really deal with that, and we don't want to go that route. Regarding your question with, there are people out there, what do they need to understand, if I'm correctly, and what do they need to know what we need.
What can people do? What would you say, the layman person on the street?
I think the first thing You must first have the knowledge and understanding. It's no use, because from my point of view, if I tell you the Maltese poodle is in the threat, and you say, wow, I love Maltese poodles, I said, okay, put 10 rand down for saving Maltese poodles, and you throw 10 rand into the hat for them saving the Maltese poodle. You have no idea. You're just trusting, and you're just loving Maltese poodles, and somebody said something that triggered something in your mind. But you don't have any idea what you are paying money for, or is it even real? And I think the first thing is that people shouldn't donate funds to something where they don't understand what they are donating to. But because that forces people to be more involved and more clued up as to what they're dealing with. So, and for that you need knowledge, and the right type of knowledge, input. You don't need narratives of certain groupings with certain hidden agendas. You need to make sure that people want the reality out there, and they're looking for the truth, even if it hurts. You want the truth. And people shouldn't be that, if they want to get involved or want to participate, they should enhance their ability to understand. And when they make contributions, or where they are moving abroad and they know that they're dealing with people that can contribute, that maybe have the funding to do it, but they don't have the time to contribute, they can convince those people to contribute to the right organizations to do the right type of thing. I think to channel the funding that's available in the right channels for conservation, and see that less money lands up for administrative purposes and not getting onto the ground, and more of that funds and available money is channeled in a way that more of it lands into actually applying the job on the ground. Because at this stage there's a lot of loss, and what happens then is people start getting more or less eager to donate because they feel, listen, I don't trust, and then so you want to create that trust that people can see, wow, things are happening. So that will again entice people to say, listen, we need to contribute because things are happening. Now people are asking, so what happened to this funding? What happened to this? And then, no, there was 10 rand donated to this lady who she had lost a sheep. But in the meantime, there was $1 million donated in the process, and only $10 landed up on the ground. You want it the reverse way, so that you make sure that and I think the only way that will happen is people are more informed, that are participating in either working or gaining funding for organizations, or actually donating. So I think that will be, because why I'm saying this is that conservation will depend more in future on the goodwill of donating, people donating organs. The state at this stage is dealing with so many other issues that conservation is just a small slither of the cake left, that it's merely to keep the heartbeat going instead of getting maintaining conservation. No, it won't be able to, because the moment you put it in I can already tell you that we've seen the signs of it. Certain things happen in the private sector, that it will be dog-eat-dog in the private sector, because it will become so messy. There needs to be a policing organ, and it needs to be
legislative.
In the state where it can be enforced and regulated. The people that with the intent to do the right things are sitting there. They just need the right information to make the right decisions, and you have to have the final say in conservation. I'm not talking about impalas that are plenty full everywhere, that it's a species of high abundance. To say, listen, at the end of the day, for us to write 500 permits every day for impala to hunt or to harvest or whatever is a waste of time. Let's hand this over to the wildlife sector themselves. Let them regulate it, because if they do harm there, they'll harm themselves. There are certain things that you can hand over, or you can kind of take your hand a little bit of the fuel gauge, if you want to call it that. But I think there are certain things that the state just need to step up and be able to keep control of that. But to regulate what needs to be done is important, that the information is fed from all really affected parties. I'm very cautious to use the word interest, because everybody's interested. but they don't really contribute. The affected parties, that they can contribute to a healthy system. And if it needs to be that there should be a higher leniency in terms of delegating authority lower down, then be it. But at the end of the day, the main organ that should be looking after conservation have to be the state. You can't delegate that authority because it will create havoc.
Okay. Poaching, anti-poaching units, where are we? What can be done? What's the future?
I think that it's such a multifaceted thing that there's lots that needs to be done, and in terms of the number of people on the ground that's doing anti-poaching is by far less than the threats that we are facing. And remember, whereas the people that are posing the threats of poaching are usually aware of where the anti-poaching people are moving around. It's not always, but often the anti-poaching guys have to anticipate where the threats will come from. So you can't have a uniform line that's every 200 meters an anti-poaching guy. You have people moving around, kind of spot checking in the bush and working on information, the various approaches. I'm not an anti-poaching specialist, but I know from the noises in the corridors and stuff like that, that we are not really winning because a huge amount of our resources are there to protect certain areas in terms of poaching. Certain areas, I'm saying there's certain parks and important parks, and where there's funding available. But the places where there's no funding available, you've got different types of poaching. You've got a person that poaches for meat to sustain himself, to survive. You've got a person that have commercialized that bushmeat trade and making money out of it, and he's made it his own. It's usually syndicates that's involved, that's making money out of it. And then you sit to the next level, people that are poaching for muti trade and for rhino horn and stuff like that. So it's all different reasons why people are poaching, and there's different amounts of money or refund involved in it. And you have to know what type of people you're dealing with before you can know what type of people to deploy to counter that. It's no use putting your high-tech people against the bushmeat guy who just wants an impala and survive from that, and you put your normal kind of ranger or law enforcement guy against highly, I won't call them sophisticated, but they've got all the necessary support networks to support them for shooting, and they're walking around with heavy-duty firearms or automatic firearms, and they will shoot to kill. They won't run away when you shoot, they'll shoot back. And I think you have to understand what you're dealing with first of all. And then the plot in terms of what's happening on the ground, I think if you have to be realistic, we are busy losing a lot of animals and getting animals severely injured, and not just injured, but what's the right word for it, mutilated, based on the fact that they're using not just poison, which is killing out heaps of animals at a time, but also snares and things that are actually mutilating the animals and causing damage. And I think it's a huge shift was post-COVID. In the COVID time, a lot of people lost their jobs, and suddenly they sit on the edges of wildlife resources and places like that, and saw that as a substitute for losing their jobs, that they have to revert to catching wildlife now to have food on the table, as well as people seeing it as an opportunity to exploit new venues of making money. And I think so it escalated. There's definitely an escalation, and I don't know if there's enough evidence physically of sound, what we call robust data that can actually support that. But it definitely, the trend from all the noise and all the reports, it's clearly that there's way more reports and incidents happening after the COVID period than before that.
That's not good.
Yeah, and then you have poachers that actually physically target a species, like either rhinos for the rhino horn trade. They're not interested in the body parts, they want the rhino horns. And then you sit with people that poach leopards for the skins and the body parts. They want it as a muti, or hyenas, because hyenas are strong muti. So it's in the muti industry, the black magic or the sangoma or the
Witch doctor.
the witchcraft type of thing. There's another target where people are targeting these animals. So that's the danger area where people are extirpating populations, because they're not setting snares to catch impalas and other things. They want to catch that leopard, and they want to take it out, and that's where you start having targeted approaches, and that's to me is one of the most dangerous things for species wise, especially your top predators and things like that.
You had 2 incidents in your life with carnivores. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, and what happened to you, how did it happen, when did it happen, etc.?
Yeah, well, it's it all depends on what you want to call it. You say it's incidents, it's accidents, or is it it's pure negligence or whatever. I think, yeah, the first incident that was with a lion, young male, was not far from where we're sitting, literally about 3 kilometers from where we are sitting now, and I was dealing with in those days you didn't have all the books that you could read and how to do this and how to do that. There wasn't manuals for catching a lion and treating a wound, and you still had the perception that you had to treat a wounded animal or injured animal. You have to care for it, and the way to care for it is to capture it and to treat the wound. And I have to say, we at that point in time, we've dealt with quite a number of different lion incidents. And I had the vet out there a couple of times to try and capture this female, but it was she was, for some reason, she just knew we wanted to capture her and she was avoiding us. So the cost of trying to capture this female was getting quite high. At that point in time, I was still lucky, because this vet was he had these 2 assistants from overseas that he wanted to, I don't say impress, but anyway, he was not really charging us fees because he was working down here, so he just popped in to see if he can do something. So it was a minimal fee, but it was going to count up somewhere, because every time he had to take off some of his time in his surgery room for other work. And I decided, okay, what I'll do is I'll set out the cage trap and capture the female, and once I have her in the cage trap, he can come down, bring his dart gun, and in those days only a few vets still had dart guns in their possession, and then he can come and do the darting and treat the female. And I had the cage trap out there in the bush, set it up with meat, and I caught every other lion except the one that I wanted. So this carried on for about 2 weeks, and I realized that I'm not going to catch, because I started catching a one male 3 times in a row, and it's not going to work. So we had this enclosure built that was there at the back of one of the enclosures, and we actually modified it so that we can use it for a trapping, like a boma, to lure into, and put the cage trap inside there, and then first lure the lions inside and then chase out the excess lions. And at least if you have 3 lions left, if you set the cage trap and you catch the wrong lion, you can just chuck him on the outside and bring back the cage trap until you finally got the 1 lion left that you want. So in my mind, I had the perfect plan, because of all the other plans that started failing at that point in time. And I had friends over that came to visit me, and we were busy, and there was a water leak at one end of the reserve, and I wanted to go and fix it. And I said to him, listen, before we go and fix that water leak, it's going to take us half a day to do all the things. Let's first go and make breakfast, and then we will go back and fix the water leak. And when we got into the house, for some reason I took off my sidearm and I put it on the table with a big knife as well. I had a big Bowie knife that I carried with me. And in those days I carried them for protection from, in case I get attacked by a wild animal, but also we had a lot of what we call terrorism in those days. People coming in, putting out landmines and attacking farms and stuff like that. And I still don't know why I placed it down there, but you know what, I didn't think that we're going to catch a lion just now, or try and catch a lion. And then the next minute the one guy came there and said, listen, the lioness is in the camp that we wanted to capture. And finally in. The other lions went in all the time, and she stayed outside. And I said to them, let's go and close the gate and come back and finish breakfast, and then we can continue. When I got there, I saw, okay, the lioness is in this camp alone with another young male. The other lions are outside. So this is going to be easy. I'm just chasing out the young male, and then we know in our own time we can trap the female. And when I took the vehicle inside, I was driving, took my bakkie inside, pick up, and as I went inside, this young male, he was a skittish male. He was about 16 months old. He kept on moving backwards, inwards, and I realized, okay, there's a ticker down there. Once he's in there, we're not going to get him out of there, and we're going to struggle. And instead of sitting back, reassessing the situation, and then this made a decision in my quick, fast nature, I don't know what you want to call it, I decided, let me go and chase out that male, and once he's out, then we're done. And I told my friend and his wife, just keep an eye on this female here, make sure she's happy there, and I'll walk in and chase out the male. So I walked down and I chased out the male, but when he got to the car, I didn't realize at that time that they don't see fence and a gate opening, they just see they cornered, they trapped, there's a vehicle in the way, and the space between the vehicle and the fence and the gate at the back was maybe too small for him. And as he got there, he got kind of frustrated, he turned around and came back, and in my mind is, no, you're not going back, because if you ran into the back there, we're not going to get you out. Now you hyped up and stuff like that. So I won't say I jumped up in front of him, but I kept on shouting and clapping my hands, wanting him to turn around, and in the next minute he came for me because he saw me as a threat. So he attacked me, and it's a story of complacency and stupidity at the same time. there's no heroics in it. The heroics was the fact that I had to fight for my life, and not heroics. The where I was lucky to end up was to come out with just I was quite badly ripped, but I survived. At the end of the day, I was lucky that when he knocked me, he jumped on me to knock me down, and he wasn't a hungry lion. He wasn't there because he was hungry or injured or whatever. He was merely anxious and disturbed, and he felt like he had to escape. And he wanted to get me out of the way. So when he jumped onto me, instead of me going down onto the ground, I fell against a knobthorn tree, and that kept me up. And I think he wasn't expecting that. So he slid down and grabbed me around the leg. And like typically what a lion is doing is they hold on to you, they hold on to one area. They don't maul you all the time and growl like a leopard's doing. They hold on to you, and they start clawing you, because I was going through all these things in my mind. Okay, they said if a lion attacks you, push your hand down his throat, because he will gag and open his mouth. And there was no space to put a match in, never mind my hand. And those clamps around your leg is like an iron fist. There's no way you're going to open those clamps. So I couldn't get my hand any place in except in the side of his mouth, and I realized, no, he's going to chomp off my hand anyway if I push it in there. And then I decided, okay, I'm going to hit him on the eyes, because I had nothing with me, not only my bare hands. I'm going to punch him on the eyes, because that's the next soft part that he's having, and he's holding on to my. As I was punching his eyes, he was clawing me, and he was ripping my arms into other areas. He ripped out some sinews and flesh and things like that. But I was punching him, and I realized if he closes his eye, it's just bone. There's nothing you can eat. And then the next thing that came up to me is push your thumbs into his eyes. And then I started pushing my thumbs into his eyes, and that's when he actually kind of gagged. And I think he wanted to reset his bite, and he was clawing me and grabbing my arms with his feet, because he couldn't see anything at that point in time. So he was just working towards whatever was causing the pain. And I was lucky because I could feel him releasing the grip. And at that point I had to physically, I say, rip my leg out of his mouth. And I got my leg out, and I can't remember whether I pushed him aside. I think I pushed him aside as well, but also that it just worked out that he moved to the right and passed, and then he went down, and I could get out of the way. But at that point in time, the other lions was busy running up and down the fence here trying to get in. They wanted to assist this one because they heard the growls and stuff. And this friend of mine was shouting at me, listen, the other lions are there. And I said to him, just throw them, let's keep them away. And he was throwing them with logs and stones, whatever he can find at the back of the gate. And then the next minute he said to me, those lions are coming in. So they started finding the gate and coming in. So if it was 3, 5, 10 seconds later, I would have been gone, because the rest of the pride would have been there to assist him. And I just jumped in the vehicle and said to him, listen, we have to get out of here. And I was still driving down to the house, and I could feel that. I didn't feel pain or anything. I could feel the flesh tearing, and you can hear it tearing, but there was no pain involved. And when we got back, I said to him, listen, we must just finish breakfast so we can go and fix up that water pipe. He said to me, fix the water pipe, you've got to get to a doctor. I said, no, I'm fine, I'm fine, it was just a little bit of blood, just wash it off. He said to me, you're not going anywhere. He said to me, you're getting in the car and we're taking you to the doctor. I felt, no, it's not that bad, because I didn't feel pain, it didn't look that bad. When I got to the doctor, he looked at me and said, what the heck did you do? I said, well, I had an incident with a lion.
Okay, an incident with a lion. And the next incident?
Yeah, that was many years later when I actually...
Now you've wisened up, you've learned from the first one.
Yeah, I think the second one wasn't the one of complacency, that was more of making the wrong calculations. And also, sorry, I'm just looking at that flame that's whirling like this. It's a matter of how easy it is to miscalculate, because you have got murky stuff on your brain in terms of what you had to do that day, and the objective was to collar a leopard that was caught in a leg snare. And it was interesting because the day before, I said to someone, listen, there's going to be a leopard in one of those. We were waiting for a month now, just came from Botswana and from a trip, and there hasn't been a leopard in those leg traps. It's a leg hold thing that actually, it's like a cable that goes around the foot and holds it back. And it's we had them set out, and she said to me, no, there won't be a leopard, it's Saturday. I said, no, tomorrow morning we're going to get a call, and that leopard's going to be in that. She said, no, it's no ways. Next morning early, call, leopard caught. And I had to go out, that was a Saturday morning. It was it was the 12th of September. 2012, the 15th of September, and it was a murky day, very like a hazy, rainy, foggy day. It was one of those typical days that you don't want trouble, but you were expecting trouble. And I just put on a jacket and went out, and I decided to leave my firearms behind, because I usually take a sidearm and a shotgun in a case like that. So there's lots of people, never had incidents. I still had to do stuff in town. I'm not going to take a firearm along, and then I had to come back all the way, drive back home to put it in the safe again, and then go back to town again. So I wanted to save time, and I actually didn't save time. I spent more time in hospital. But so when I got there, we got to the point, and there was an altercation between me and one of the film crew members, and one of the people there saying, listen, but why did they put the trap off the road so we can't access it with vehicle? Because they went in on foot, the vet and the other people that was involved, the film crew. There's a whole film crew tagging along to see how the vet's going to dart the leopard. And I was highly upset about it, because it was not protocol. And I was still arguing with one of the people down there and say, but why did you make the decision? Next minute I just heard a growl, and then a shot went off up on the mountain. And I realized something's wrong, and I ran up to this scene. And when I got there, I saw this guy down on the ground that was helping with the trapping. He was attacked and bitten by the leopard, and then this one lady said, no, the leopard's fine, don't worry, leopard. I said, no, we will decide on that. You rather leave the scene, and let's see what. And then the other guy that was with me was one of the guides from the lodge that was actually the property where it happened. And he asked me whether he can assist me in looking for this leopard or looking to see what's going on. I said to him, well, if you're prepared to assist, you're welcome. And I was still trying to make sure that the people leave the scene, and he was looking around. The next minute he said to me, listen, here's blood. And I could just see that woman that was supposed to be doing the research went pale in the face when he found the blood, saying, this is not a leopard, that's okay. I said to him, please just leave the scene, we will follow up on the leopard and see what we can do. So we started following anticipating it was very dense grass. It was very difficult terrain to track in, actually. It was also moist. There was a lot of moisture from the drizzles that happened and stuff like that. And I saw we found the blood, the one place where there was a puddle of blood. You could see it was fresh blood, and then not a trickle of blood nowhere, because you wanted to follow a blood trail. And then we found a puddle of blood again. So it looked like he was bleeding when he's lying down, but when the moment he rushed off, there was no blood spilled. And then on yellow grass and a misty morning, you should be able to see red blood very easily. And then at some point I said to this guy who's with me, listen, this cat is going to wait for us. This cat is lying down every now and again, and at some point he's going to get upset because we keep on chasing him and following him, and he's injured. He's going to turn on us. Let's me rather go and find the firearm, the shotgun, and get it, and then we continue with the follow-up. And I went back and I got the shotgun, somebody else's shotgun from this lady that was doing the so-called research, and then I followed up on this leopard and down the mountain. And at some point I realized this cat is going to turn on us. He's not going to keep on running, because he's not running long distances and lying down. Short distances, 50, 100 meters, and then lying down again, if even that distance, that far. And then I got to the bottom where there was tributaries going into the bigger riverbed at the bottom. And in my logic I said to myself, that leopard won't stay in the open, he would go into the thickets, into the denser property, spaces where there's more vegetation cover and stuff like that. And at that point I said to him, listen, you wait here, I'll just go and warn the people at the vehicles that they should get in the vehicles and wait, because we're not far from there. It was about 200, 300 meters from there. I walked back to the vehicles and I asked the people to get into the vehicle. I still took my jacket off because I felt that I need something to move, because I knew I had to go into a thicket. I didn't want myself to be caught in the thorns and on the jacket or things like that. I didn't want to tear my nice jacket either. Not knowing that in the next few minutes I'll be tearing all my clothes anyway. But I went down into the riverbed and I followed the riverbed and I looked at tracks coming through, and I saw no tracks passing through of any kind of a leopard. So I said to him, I went back again, but not up in the gully that was entering the tributary was entering this bigger riverbed. I went around, because in my opinion, if I walk from this side, that leopard's either going to attack him or me. And I went around and I got to the guy and I said to him, listen, that cat is right down here in front of us. There's 8 meters to the gully, and there's a few meters in front of us where this cat can be. She's here, or I thought at that stage was a male. He's right here somewhere. And then the next minute the baboons started barking, and this guy Brendan said the baboons saw the leopard, because that's why they would bark. And I looked up and I saw the baboons looking at us. And I said to him, no, the baboons are looking at us. They see us and they're barking at us. And I said to myself, except if, and I thought maybe this leopard, we're busy looking here, and at the back of us he's going up the mountain again. Because there's open grassland, there's a protea veld, so it was quite open. Tall grass, but you would see grass move especially from the bottom upwards. And I turned around to see if there's not anything going up, and when I turned around, something in the back of my mind said to me, don't turn your back on this gully. And as I did that, I heard the growl, and then the next minute I swung around with a shotgun which was ready to fire, and I was waiting for this cat. So it shows you how fast things are happening, but how slow it also happens at the end of the day, because your mind, seems like the adrenaline immediately kicks in and it slows down your whole process. And I just thought, I can't shoot too quickly, I have to wait for this cat to be on top of me. Of course, I had a shotgun with an open choke, so with SSG bullets, you might miss the cat. And when she was literally jumping up, I could see her facing going for my throat. And I was following the motion of the shotgun, and as I pulled the trigger, there wasn't even a click, there was nothing, it was dead. The safe was actually still on, and I took the safe off, but somehow it went back onto safe again. And then the next thing I thought is keep the barrel between you and the cat. And I picked up the barrel and as if push it into her mouth. And she actually did chew the barrel. You could see the marks on the barrel afterwards. And then that actually dropped her down, and she fell because that actually took her stride in mid-air out, and she fell on the ground. She started clawing me and climbing me from the bottom, and rabbit kicking and do all those kind of things. And she ripped this front skin of my head piece off. It was actually hanging in front of one of my eyes, so I couldn't see properly. I just stuck it back when I drove back, and it's just a piece of loose skin at the end of the day, but it bleeds like you're busy dying. But anyway, and then she actually she chewed up my hand. She cracked this hand. You can still see it's full of dents and bends. Where she took out this hand completely, my leg out, and I was kind of in split seconds I was down on the ground bleeding. And then this guy Brennan attacked her with a stick to try and help me, and she attacked him again and left me. So I got up and started trying to find out what's wrong with the rifle, and I realized it's a safety catch that's on. And I pushed it off, and the next minute she charged me again. And I just, this time was ready, and as she got to me, before I could even shoot, she grabbed hold of me, and the impact of her body, or I think she rabbit kicked me on the hand, and the shot went off, and I missed her. So I had one shell left in the shotgun, and she attacked Brennan again, and then she went into the gully again, that's when she came for me for the third time. And I was down busy trying to reload. And I don't know if it's just pure experience or whether it's something, a little voice, but I can't explain. But when I reloaded the shotgun, I heard that the barrel was empty. It was a pump action. So when I pushed it forward, I could hear that the barrel's empty. There's no shell loaded into. And when I felt at the bottom, the live shell was still at the bottom of the loading ramp. And I had to physically try and pull it back slightly and push it in, but this hand was out of action. This hand was still semi-functional because he was also bitten badly, but I could still function, and I pushed the bullet in with my hand, and then I closed the barrel again. And at that point, when she heard that, she came for me again. She charged, and I was sitting down and I just saying, listen, I have to wait again. And when she got on top of me, I was I'm not sure when I was sitting down or kneeling, but I was down on the ground. I wasn't standing anymore. She charged again, and I shot her technically on top of me. And that's when the impact, it stopped her, and she still lived for a few seconds or minutes later on, and cat crawled away from me. And that's where she died. But I didn't have time to look for the dead leopard. or whether she's dead. I had to get back because the blood was pumping out everywhere out of me. We found my watch a few days later that was ripped off as well, still lying there in the veld. It was a gift, so I had to ask them, say, listen, I'm missing my watch, and they went to look for it and they found it. And it still has the claw marks of the leopard on the glass mark where it was chewed on that specific watch. But anyway, I had to walk back to the vehicle, but I remember that walking back, this guy shouted me, your arm, and I thought, what does he mean, my arm? I asked him to carry the gun, and when I looked, I could see the blood pumping out of this, still, kind of pumping out, and I was figuring out, okay, I weigh about 100 kilograms, so it's about 70% of your body is water and blood. So I have to walk slow because I can lose so much in time, and then it would be too much. Trying to do calculations as to.
Did you lift your arm up?
No. I used this arm. Both my hands were out of action, and this arm as well. All the nerves ends, everything was ripped open. So I just use this arm to try and plug it, and I just knew I can't panic and I can't run. So I walked back, and when I got there I said to him, listen, I've been bitten by a leopard and you should actually look at these wounds and try and stop the bleeding. And eventually ended up, my medical kit was emptied out at the car wash. They stole all my stuff at the car wash, which was a full new kit. And I said, no, there's a medical kit with creep bands, everything that you can use for stopping the blood. They said, there's nothing in there, it's an empty bag. So I had my car in the car wash the day before, and they emptied it out, they stole all the stuff inside. So I was under the impression I still had a medical bag, which I didn't have. And then one of the largest vehicles that came past with a lot of tablecloths and stuff was stopping there to ask what's happening. And then one of the people saw the tablecloths at the back of the vehicle and snatched one of the tablecloths and started ripping it up and putting like a pressure tourniquet around my arms and stuff to stop the bleeding. We still had an hour's drive back from in those mountains shaking. I think that was the worst part of it all. It was worse than the attack, to sit in that vehicle there shaking in the mountains, slow drive, and the vehicle is shaking all over. There's still roadworks on the road backwards that we had to, and this guy that was driving was ignoring all the roadworks. He was just going across them and past following, trying to get me to the doctor. And there were the doctors in time, and then I landed up in hospital for a couple of weeks.
And you made it.
Yeah, well, I'm still here.
Yes. What a tale to tell. Why is conservation important?
Why is it not important? The thing is that I can answer it in a simple way and say, listen, if all people disappear from Earth now, what will happen to nature? Nothing, they will just flourish. But if all wildlife disappear, what will happen to people? People will crumble, in my opinion. We're more dependent on them than they are on us, to a large extent. And I think that's the one part. The other part is, I personally, from a personal point of view, I say that these animals were here before us. So we have a fascination with them. For us, people go to psychologists for various reasons. We go to the bush as a psychologist, to get sanity back. And so it's a place. I've never seen a person that says, I want to go and sit on the top of one of our high buildings in Joburg or Cape Town and have a holiday there. They want to go to desolated places where they can still find wildlife, where I think we're still brought back to our roots, where we understand where we're coming from. Whereas the life that we are living is also synthetic and plastic to a certain extent, and survival that we lose track of nature. And so I think it's just inherently we have that we know that we need that to be able to keep our sanity and prevail, and also be able to not just sustain the areas that we are living in, but also sustain ourselves in a mental capacity.
Well, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to sit here with you and talk to you about these things. I will definitely take you up on all the connections you have and the people that could help us tell a bigger story, or more diverse story, have more information. And I'm sure that this could, well, for me, I feel this could be the start of a very beautiful journey for myself, meeting people like you and your peers and your colleagues. I would love to help in my little way, and the only way I can help is by sharing it with these little devices.
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful idea. I also, if I want to suggest something, is that you look at. I've made this I've made the statement that it's more a bottoms-up approach in terms of decision making as to what needs to be done to preserve and conserve and stuff like that. And it's not just a governmental or institutional organ of state that says you will do this and everybody have to adhere or abide by those rules. It's more of an inclusive type of nature approach that's been used. And I think it would also be nice to actually interview people that are really intricately involved in those different fraternities of giving input to understand where they're coming from. Except for the people that are doing my line of work, which is, I think, is important in terms of keeping the train on the track. You know, I think it will be good to even interview people like that who's been in wildlife involved, but not necessarily from an organ of state. They're in a different way involved, but also for the same cause.
Thank you very much, Gerrie.
You're welcome, Brennan, anytime.
Hope to see you soon again, man.
Yeah, no.
And all the best.
No, thank you very much.
Lekker.